All right, today I want to talk a little bit about the new player experience in Destiny, as well as the struggles about it. You know, what's good, what's bad, what needs some changes. Get your all's opinion on that as well. So, the bringing new players into Destiny issue, we'll call it an issue because right now it's an issue. New players are being brought in, but I would say that the investment and the amount of time players are putting into the game once they are brought into it is quite low. And this is obviously one of the big issues that Bungie's facing right now, which is what caused the layoffs. Is player long-term investment is low, and I'd say a lot of that is from new players who jump in on that expansion hype train, season hype train, and they don't stick around. What are some of the challenges that are preventing players from sticking around longer? And how can we fix those and hopefully improve the health of the game overall in the future? So I think there's primarily 4 or 5 main issues of improvement where Bungie should bring their attention to. The first of those is the New Light experience is short. So the New Light experience, for anybody who hasn't done that, is I think 4 to 5 missions on the EDZ patrol space on Earth with Shahan. He introduces them to the bounty system, some basic gameplay systems and combat systems. I believe at the very ending of that, you conclude sort of that mini campaign with a strike that is turned into a story mission. And after that, that is the New Light experience. That is the beginning to end introduction into the beast of a game that is Destiny. The menu and the UI navigation is very clunky and confusing for new players. In a game in Destiny that has so many moving parts, it goes to reason that there's going to be a lot of menus, a lot of navigation and whatnot. And Bungie has iterated on these menus and user interfaces several times in the past, but there's been multiple people that I've got into the game in the last 3 to 4 years, and the menus and the UIs have been confusing in just about every iteration. So there's definitely some specific attention and hopefully some condensing that can be done on that front. A third thing that I believe is causing some problems with the new player retention is the leveling and the progression in the game. There's a few ins and outs that I think are misconstruing what it means to progress in Destiny, and how players should prioritize their time, how they level effectively. The next thing is the access to activities and the navigations in the game, I think, is a problem. As a New Light player, once you get through that New Light campaign, you kind of have run of the mill as far as what you want to jump into. Pretty much the entire map full of activities opens up, all the raids, all the dungeons, all the destination spaces and missions. And I think that there is a more efficient way to introduce and roll out things, such as the entire expansiveness in the game to players in a way that makes sense. So I think that's another option as well. It immediately another issue. It immediately floods them with all these activities, and the question I'm asked is, what should I do? And I think that if a new player is asking what should they do in the game that early as a new player, I think that there's a failure or a problem that needs to be fixed. The second problem, another issue that pops up, this is kind of related to the activities topic I just mentioned, is the game kind of advertises, at several different stages, the newest thing. You get done with a certain mission as a new player, or you try to select some specific piece of content that is not blocked off to you, and you're immediately hit with an advertisement. Starting the game for the very first time, you're also going to be hit with advertisements and pop-ups and notifications just before you even create your character. That's a questionable design decision. We'll mention that. And then finally, the last topic is the investment into the game is way too expensive and confusing for a new player. Destiny 2 is a free-to-try game. That's the expression that I'll use. And if you want to spend money and invest into the game and buy content, I don't think there is a very well thought out pathway to getting everything you need to have the current content. And if you're interested in the old content, there's not an easy way to get all of it at a discount or at once. And if there are easy ways to do it, there are more efficient ways and improvements we can make to those. So those are the issues I think plaguing the experience. Let's go a little deeper into each of those, and then we'll talk a little bit. I'd be interested to hear what you have to say as well in the comments. If you're a new player, if you're an old player, what you think about it. So let's go ahead and run down. First topic, New Light experience. This is the core sort of campaign, introduction, opening missions into the game, the first few moments into the world of Destiny. So once again, they consist primarily of some missions on the European Dead Zone patrol space with Shahan. He is going to introduce you through, you know, some basic bounty systems. He's going to introduce you to the gameplay, the combat. You're going to be getting your first weapons. You're going to be introduced to a few of your basic abilities and navigating the world when you are speaking to Shahan. There is also, towards the ending of those beginning introduction quest lines, the very first people who've ever played the game, or the very first time these people have played this game, some of those missions will grant you legendaries and exotic tier loot in those introductory quest lines. I think that is a major issue for loot immediately that is presented to the player. So yeah, that's kind of the introduction. You play these 5 or 6 missions with Shahan, you get introduced to some of the core basics of Destiny, and then from there you're kind of cut loose. So an improvement for this, I think, and it's going to be an investment from Bungie, and I think that of any area in the game to put significant investment and time into, it is the new player experience. And when I say it means, you know, this is going to take investment, that's what I mean, because I think that optimally there needs to be some kind of Red War-esque style campaign or progression of quest line that brings you through the spaces in Destiny and gets you into the game in a more granular pace, because instead of what's happening in these 4 to 5 missions in one destination, you're introduced to all the systems that make the game, you know, its basic levels, you know, in this short time span, and then you're cut loose. When you had the older vanilla Destiny 2 campaign, which was, you know, 10, 20 missions long, you would have these systems kind of granularly introduced to you. The game was very different back then as well. But, you know, having more missions across the game, more destinations that have 1 to 2 missions on them, will allow Bungie to introduce these systems and give players more times with these systems and combat mechanics before cutting them loose with the rest of the game, where, you know, that knowledge should be expected of Guardians. And it's not the new player's fault that they don't know these new systems. It is the design of the, you know, the introduction of the onboarding at fault. And when players don't know how to do these things that other players do know how to do. So recapping that, I think the quest line, the new player quest line, when you first load up the game and make a new character, should be 1 to 2 missions, or even 1 to 3 missions for every destination in the game. You're going to do 1 to 2, 3 missions on the EDZ. You're going to do 1 to 2 missions on the moon. You're going to do 1 to 2 missions on Nessus, 1 to 2 in the Dreaming City, 1 to 2 in the newest expansion destination, etc., etc. And, you know, it doesn't have to be the longest thing in the world. I do think also characters who are newly made should have the option of skipping this, or new players should have the option to skip this at any point in time if they want to, or you should have the option to rerun it at any point in time if you want to. It's really about giving the player choice and giving the players who want to take the time to learn this game the option to do so, and those who don't want to, not hold their hand if they don't feel the need to. So I do think that 1 to 2, maybe even 3 missions for every destination in the game that introduce these core systems at a more granular pace is really an awesome decision that Bungie, I think, should consider in the long-term health of the new player onboarding. I also think that the quest lines and the quests that new players go through with Shahan and these, you know, the new line experience should have a variation of difficulty options that they should be allowed to select. And I think that, you know, based on the difficulty that the player selects, that gives Bungie an easy way to introduce, you know, more advanced mechanics, such as the champion system, such as subclass verbs, and even the mod system, which doesn't, you know, go into a great deal of depth in the 1 to 2 missions, or excuse me, the 4 to 5 missions they have with Shahan on Earth. So I think that, again, giving player choice, if players choose to go through this introductory quest line and they, you know, grasp the straws of the game really quickly and they want to turn it up a notch, they want to see what the combat of Destiny is, some of the understanding mechanics, go a little deeper into that. I think that giving a option to up the ante on these missions and introduce some of those is also a way for Bungie to trickle in and sprinkle in some of those introduction combat mechanics that the Shahan quest line does not. An example, as I've mentioned, is you can go through the entire Shahan quest line in Destiny, 5 to 6 missions. After that, you can start going into some pieces of content, story missions, where there are champions. And the player's never seen a champion. They may not understand the champion mechanic, and that is a failure to teach them. And I think that, you know, giving players the choice to go through and learn those options and learn those and having them introduced to them would be something worthwhile. A final note of the New Light experience, I've mentioned briefly that at the ending of these New Light campaigns and missions, the players are immediately given these legendary purple rarity items, and there's even some introductory New Light quest that will introduce them to exotic gear and reward them with exotic gear. It is my personal belief that as a new player in Destiny, you should be dealing with whites and greens in the introductory quest line. The best items you should be getting is blue items in the intro quest line. Anything legendary or exotic that you receive as a player brand new to the game is going to be, or needs to be, only cosmetic. Ghost, ships, shaders, sparrows, that's all fine. The best gear for the gameplay in the game should be established immediately in the New Light experience, that legendaries and exotics are rare, and they should be treated as rare. You should not expect to get them everywhere. Even though in the game that they do get them everywhere, I still think it's kind of crucial to set the understanding to a new player that you're not going to be getting legendaries and exotics every time you play something. So that's my preference. Whites and greens should be what you use as a New Light player. You should get all the way to the ending and maybe only see a few blues, is my belief in that. All right, next item on the list is the menu and the UI navigation, the user interface. So the questing, the collections, the maps, triumphs, lore, friends list, the Eververse, these are all menus that are introduced to the players and I would say are integral to, you know, going around the game, understanding what's happening, and the introduction to them is kind of pitiful, I guess I should say. One example of this is during the introductory combat, you know, of the game, when you're going through these New Light quests and campaigns, you're going to be getting pop-ups in the middle of combat during these engagements, asking you as a player to go into a menu, complete some obscure function or objective, and the pop-up is going to keep popping up over and over and over again until you go through and you complete what it's asking you to do. And a lot of the times it doesn't even have anything to do with what you're doing as a player. It's going to teach you where the collections are. It's going to teach you where the triumphs are. You know, I do value and get the value in having players understand where these menus are. I just think that the implementation and the rollout of how these are taught and given to the player are, you know, in desperate need of some revisions. So a few suggestions that I have. The quests, map, and bounties should be conjoined, I believe, into a single menu. The map of the game, I think, should update in real time based on, you know, the current bounty or quest or objective that the player is hovered over or clicking on, so that anytime a player sees a quest or a bounty in their, you know, their journal, so to speak, selecting it immediately pulls up the destination in the game, an option to launch, as well as some context about that. And Bungie actually has introduced something like this where if you select a quest in the journal, it will bring up a launch option, but I think that you could also condense the map menu as well into this screen, just so we can condense some of these menus and the obscurities around them. And another thing that's confusing is new players, when they open the map, will have these objectives on the left open up, and they aren't quests, they aren't bounties, but they also aren't, you know, given much context. So this just needs to be condensed into the quest option. And again, maps, quest, and bounties, I think, can exist all in a single menu with some of Bungie's, you know, magic sauce that they put in some of these menus, because visibly the menus always look awesome. It's just they're confusing as heck. I also think that the collections, the lore, and the triumphs should all be combined into a single tab, and then within that single tab you can have sub-tabs for each one of these as well. I think primarily players are probably going to be more interested in the collections tab. If you're a lore person, a lore tab, and you maybe even have, you know, give players the option to pin tabs, so that certain ones open up if they're more, you know, worried about the lore, worried about triumphs, worried about collections. I think that you can combine each one of those three into a single menu, and then allow players to drill down into those. Friends list, clan, and social menu, I think, should all be combined into one. The friends list and social menu kind of already exist as a single one, but the clan menu is just kind of off to itself in your inventory character screen. I think you can bring that in as well. There's no reason for it to be off to the side, as I think it could be conjoined. I also think that, you know, giving players a full tutorial over, you know, where these menus are, the value in these menus, I think that should be something that they could choose to disable in the middle of combat if you're going to keep that system where pop-ups happen over and over again. I also think that you should possibly give the option of having a button that just goes through, introduces them slide by slide, menu by menu. If they've got a free second in the tower, you know, a pop-up comes up and says, you know, would you like an introduction to the menus? Go through each one, explain it briefly, and that's as simple as it needs to be. No reason for it to be popping up in content every time something new happens, or if the player just wants to skip it outright and explore it themselves, they have that option. I also think that the Eververse and the Battle Pass should be combined into a single menu that you can quickly go up and down between using the direction buttons. I think that, you know, keeping the purchasing microtransaction element of the game in a single menu just kind of makes sense. I also think that, you know, all these menus should be able to be accessed from the character screen. So right now in Destiny, you can, you know, pull out your ghost and go into your character screen. You've got your inventory, your collections, your triumphs, your lore, the clan page, and then you have a second set of menus that are the map, the quest, the social screen, Eververse, and the battle pass. I think that, you know, with the suggestions that I've made, condensing a few of these down would allow you to pull out your ghost and your character screen. You could go to the right, have your inventory. You could go to the right again, have your roster, your friends, your social screen that has your clan in it. If you choose to go to the left from your character screen, you've got your map, you've got your quest journal, you've got your destinations right there. And if you go left, once again, then you'll have your collections, your lore, your triumph, and you should not have to have these two separate systems of menus to navigate. You know, I tell a player to open up their quests, and they're opening up their inventory screen, and you know that there should be just a single set of menus to navigate between, but there's not in this game. And I think that some condensing and some realization and how confusing it is as a new player should be observed and, you know, acted upon. And finally, last thing, I've already mentioned this, but I'll mention it again because watching new players play this game, it frustrates me to no end. Please, during player engagements, during combat in the game, which combat is the best part of your game, do not have pop-ups popping up asking them to navigate to certain parts of the screen. Wait until the combat is concluded before you ask them to. And also, you know, keep it up on the screen for 20-30 seconds. If they don't engage with it in 20-30 seconds, you know, hide it. Whenever they open up their menu the next time, then pop it up there. You know, like I said, drives me crazy seeing these pop-ups over and over again. The new players are experiencing the game, playing the game for the first time. Let them enjoy it. Whenever they open their menu up, then you can start telling them what to do. All right, next thing with the new light experience, and I think could use some work, is the leveling and the progression in the game. So a few observable points is the low-level guardians in Destiny 2. You load up Destiny 2 for the first time, and you're going to be getting, you start with loot that is 1600, 1600, okay? You know, all of the drops and content that you are going to do in that game in your experience are going to keep leveling until the 1800s. Once you're in the 1800s, the more difficult content completions are going to be what gives you the upgrades, you know, into the high 1800s and 1900s. So that's kind of how the leveling system works. And, you know, as a new light player, when you're going through this new light introductory quest line, you know, I wouldn't expect players to really be engaging in the post 1800 leveling. I think that it should be explained to them in some way through a tutorial, of course. But I think that realistically, the new light guardians are going to be in that 16 to 1700 range if Bungie chooses to keep the leveling system. But let's get on to some of the suggestions that I have. First and foremost, let's get out of this system where players start out 1600. The first time Bungie made this decision, I have been confused and concerned, and just it doesn't make sense to me why that this happens. There needs to be a level squeeze. And Bungie's already done this one time. I believe it was done with the Forsaken or Shadowkeep expansion. I could be wrong on that, but there needs to be a level squeeze. As a new player in Destiny, when you first load up the game, you should have gear that starts at level 1 power level. That just makes sense. And this may just be a preference thing. It may not matter to a lot of people, but to me, it does. Second thing, or I guess this goes with the first point, you know, Guardians should be introduced to gear at level 1. Level 1 should be the floor of gear in the game. The gear score squeeze should be performed so that anything which is as the floor now in the game is 1600. Anything that is sunset or, you know, at the floor, the lowest level piece of gear you can get in the game should become the new level 1. The new gear cap, or how high gear can go to if you play the game and upgrade, should be in the 300 to 400 range, which does follow with what the game is now. You start out at 1600, you can level until about the 1900s, so that's about a 200-300, you know, point level experience. I think that new players start at level 1, they can go to gear score 300. Every expansion, this gear score increase should jump roughly 150 to 200 points. You should have 100 to 150 just basic grind levels, which go by quickly. You should have, I think, around 40 levels that require those more completion, hardcore, you know, or not hardcore, but the more difficult challenges for those running 40, 50 levels. And then I do think the 10 pinnacle levels, which you can only get from doing raids and nightmare dungeons, or excuse me, from Grandmaster. Been playing too much Diablo. The pinnacle levels, I think, should come from the Grandmasters as well, the harder content in the game raids. So That point right there is special to me, because I think that coming into a game where the gear you're getting is already, you know, thousands of levels higher, you know, you've never played this game before, you're getting gear 1600, you know, is everything amazing because it's 1600? What does 1600 mean? No. If you get a piece of gear it's level 1, you know it's level 1, you know it sucks. And I think that if you see something that's 300, 400, wow, it's much better than level 1. Again, this is just maybe just a preference thing. I've been playing this game probably too long, but I think that a gear squeeze should be performed. And I think the gear squeeze should be performed in a way that allows them to build on it in future years. Every time there's an expansion, I don't think the lowest level piece of gear you get should go up. I think it's perfectly fine in 4 or 5 years, or 4 or 5 years, for, you know, the gear score to be in the 500-600s. I think it's still perfectly fine for players to start at level 1. You know, as you go through the introduction of the game, maybe jump up how quickly they level. You know, when the cap in the game is 400, you know, you start as a new player, you get a green item, it's going to jump you up 5-6 points, 5-6 points, 10 points, whatever. And then, you know, if the gear cap in the game is 600 or 700 a few years down the road, then change that to where you get a new item, it jumps up, you know, 10 or 11 points, 12 points. It's just an inflation system. I still think it's valuable starting out players at level 1 and having them climb the ranks and really feel that progression. So that point might just be preference to me, but I think that starting out new players to this game who maybe have never played a game like this, maybe they've never played an FPS before, this makes sense to start out people at level 1 with the gear they have, and then go to, you know, what's kind of current. Another suggestion that I have for the leveling and progression of new light players is the ability unlock system. I think the new abilities from Ikora, it's a smart idea. I do suggest, however, that the abilities should all just be pop-ups in your subclass menu. When you hover over an item you don't have access to, just purchase it for Glimmer right there. I don't think there's a need to really go back and forth between Ikora. I don't even think there's a need to be going back and forth for the strand items as well. I think it's perfectly fine to keep all of the available grenades, abilities, fragments, aspects just in your UI, in your subclass screen. And then as a new player, you hover over a grenade that sounds really cool. It says you need 1,000 Glimmer. Go get 1,000 Glimmer. It doesn't say not unlocked yet, and then not give you any context as to how to unlock it. You know, that's just a thing for me. I think that unlocking things in your subclass should be obvious, very clear, explanative how to get that, and I think it should be currency based, or it could be level based. You know, every 15-20 levels you get for power level, keep that investment grind there. You're going to get a permanent unlock on a grenade for a class or whatever. You know, that's an incentive to keep the player playing. All right, next item on the new player journey problem sort of list we've got is the access to activities and the navigation of the game from the start. And when I say start, I really mean, you know, immediately after they've, you know, helped Shawhan and complete that new light quest. So after you've beaten the new light quest line with Shawhan on the EDZ, you essentially have full access and full reigns to every destination in the game. I think at one point this may still be the case. You have to unlock some of these destinations with Glimmer. But other than that, you can land in the zone. When you open up the zone map, you have all the different strengths and menus and options that are there. And it is very inflating and confusing to new players when this kind of stuff happens. Now, this was an issue that was previously not a thing in the game. And the reason it wasn't a problem in the game is because when vanilla Destiny 2 was vanilla, players would slowly, over time, as they played the main campaign, which was the Red War, different parts of the destinations would slowly over time become available. And whenever a new destination became available to the player, it wasn't immediately fully open. You could go to all the patrol spaces, you could go everywhere. It was progressively laid out to you in a way that made sense. You know, the newest destination and the place you can go to that destination was more than likely where you should be at for the story. So that existed at one point in vanilla Destiny, and what we have now, since there's not a primary campaign that goes through with the player, we do have the new expansion campaigns that pretty much all of them just focus on a single destination. It slowly unlocks over time. There really needs to be sort of a progression system that is made obvious to the player that slowly over time these new destinations and the activities on these destinations will be made available to you. I think that also endgame content such as the dungeons and the raids should not even be visible to players, to new players, until they have completed, you know, the New Light campaign, and they've also completed the leveling journey to the soft cap. There is absolutely no reason that new players should be, you know, seeing these activity nodes on their map to further confuse and kind of convolute what they're looking for until they have hit that soft cap and the gear or the activities are even, you know, worth running at that point. So that's point of convolution that I think the game needs to be looked at. The core playlists, such as the strikes, gambit, and PvP, should be made available to the players immediately after the very first mission of, the campaign, the introductory campaign is done. I think in that first mission, you should be giving the players a primary weapon, a special weapon, and a heavy weapon. I think you should also be giving them a super ability, a grenade ability, and a class ability, because that is the bare minimum that a player needs to effectively run strikes, effectively compete in PvP, and effectively compete in game. I think that a new player who wants to hop into Destiny and play PvP or play strikes or play these core activities, those are the core activities of the game. If somebody's heard of Gambit, they've heard of Destiny, they want to play Gambit, that should be something they should pretty much be able to do pretty quickly. I think that those core, very core activities such as the Gambits and the strikes and the PvP, those are rudimentary and introductory quests or introductory activities. I think getting the people into them immediately makes sense after that first mission. So I think that, the first mission should establish the super basics, get them enough to know how to use the buttons on their keyboard and their controller, and then throw them in the mix in those activities if they choose to do that. If they don't choose to do that, then the next obvious decision or step in their journey should be, completing that campaign, completing those campaign missions on Earth. They're going to then progress to the moon. The moon's going to show them some new things, the EDZ, Nessus, etc., etc. I also think that the seasonal content and the expansion content should not be presented in any way to the player until they have completed the new light missions on every destination. I think that giving players, these advertisements for buying the new expansion, playing the new seasonal content, giving them the option to click on the seasonal content or seasonal quest in a game they've never played before, just financially, sure, you can trick people to buying it in or thinking they need to buy it, but as a new player who's never played the game before, it's not a good experience. And I honestly, this is a true story. I've as I've said, introduced 2 to 3 people into the game, and we're in Discord and we're screen sharing. I can see what they're playing, they can see what I'm playing, and they're in these introductory missions. They complete the mission, and then 10 pop-ups, 10 ads. Buy this now, pre-order bonus here, new season here, play this mission here, start this mission, start this quest. I get embarrassed. I recoil in my chair at just how much just the word scum comes to my mind, the scummy practice of throwing those things at a new player who has never played the game before. That stuff definitely doesn't need to be there. And when it comes to the season content and the expansion content, those two things are for people who obviously want to invest and keep playing the game. And I think that those kinds of advertisements, and if a player wants to pursue those, they should have the know-how to go out and get that and get those activities, get that purchase if they want that. I think that presenting that to new players who are still going through the introductory quest line is not good. I think that a more appropriate way to do this, if Bungie still wants to do this, first off, I think that no content that requires any kind of expansion or season purchase should be available to be clicked on in the player's menu until the player again has completed the new light missions and they've begun their leveling journey. There's no reason you should be able to click on any of these and get an advertisement if you've not even done the tutorial. The second thing I think that's also here that Bungie again could do if they want to still advertise those to some degree is the new light story mission should conclude in a social destination, such as the farm, such as the tower. And in this destination, they should be presented with Ikora, Zavala, anybody from the game, or even Shao Han. And this individual should give the player, choices. They should say that you can continue your journey to become a more powerful guardian by playing the seasonal activity or, progressing in the seasonal. And then if they click on the season, it gives them a splash page, some information. If they want to go purchase it, they can. They should also have a secondary option that says you can assist our allies in the latest expansion campaign. This is where you can start your leveling journey. You can give them a splash page here. No harm done. Player knows when they click on that what they're going to be interested in. And then finally, another option, a third option that you could give them, which should also be just as flashy. Don't make the first two flashy and make the not buy anything free path just boring. A third splash page should say, continue your leveling journey in the core playlist, the strikes, the nightfalls, the PvP, Gambit, and the free raids that they have access to, the free activities. I think that, once a player reaches the point where they are going to start asking the question, what should I be doing in your game? That is the point where it's okay to start presenting them options on what to do even if those options are, you know, paid season or expansion pieces of content. And I also do want to give Bungie kudos that Bungie will usually let the first mission of the campaign or of the season, you know, quest line or season activity, they'll typically make those things free. So this is even another option where you could tell the player, we could jump into this, you could jump into that, or you could jump into that, all the while reinforcing that, you know, they're still on that early leveling journey. They still need to get to the soft gear score, and anything they do is going to help them get there. So that is one thing, or a few things, I guess, regarding the full access to the activities, the navigation, you know, the advertising to the players. I think take some feedback there, because, you know, there's lots of discussions about the monetization of the game, and I think that one of the areas for major improvement is the way that you introduce these things to new players when they're first playing the game for the first time. Okay, final thing I want to discuss is the investment into the game, and this is probably the biggest, or one of the biggest things on people's list regarding getting into Destiny, problems with it, why they haven't done it yet. So a few pointers. The free-to-play players in this game have access to, you know, all the destinations. They can patrol, they can do bounties. They have access to the Strike playlist. They have access to PvP, Gambit as well. And they also have numerous free raids and dungeons, which are endgame activities that they could pursue as well once they reach, you know, those points where they want to do that content. Expansions and season content is paid content, which makes sense. This game, at its core, does allow people to jump in for free, even if the free content, you know, is skeptical as far as how good and what it can do, what players can do with it. But at its core, the game is free to jump into. There's not a box price, so it makes sense for Bungie to sell paid DLCs, expansions, seasons, etc., etc. The previous expansions and the seasons are advertised to the player throughout the game, and this is a point I've already made, where as a new player, there are going to be nodes on your map that you click on it. It's going to say you don't own this expansion, you don't own this DLC. It's going to bring you a link to the store if you would like to purchase that. You know, that's one of the investment topics that new players immediately get thrown into is, wow, okay, so there's several things in this game I have to buy if I want to play them. So the fourth thing, and probably the biggest core issue with the investment, is there's not a reliable one-time package or purchase option that Bungie has made available to players that gives them all of the relevant content needed to catch them up to the current expansion and season, and it's not offered at a discount because there's not one offered at all, to simplify that player onboarding. So first and foremost, there are other MMOs out there that I think do a much better job at wrapping up previous paid content and offering it to players. One of the examples that I'll give is Elder Scrolls Online. Elder Scrolls Online, you can pay for the base game, and then if you pay for the base game, you will also have access to pay for the most recent expansion, and then those are the two purchase options that you have. If you would like to have everything before then, we're talking every expansion, every season, or mini DLC they call them. I think there's chapters and DLC packages in that game. If you want access to everything else before then, that is an MMO that has a $15 sub, and that $15 sub gets you everything. So in the world of Elder Scrolls Online, you can pay $15 a month to get everything before the current expansion, or you can buy the current expansion and the current stuff. So there's a current content purchase path, and there's also a previous content purchase path that is relatively easy to understand. In World of Warcraft, very, very similar. There is the current content, the current expansion that you can buy, and that current expansion gives you access to everything of that year's expansion. And then if you sub to WoW, everything before that is just included in your subscription. Again, very similar to Elder Scrolls Online. In Destiny, you can purchase the current expansion. You can purchase each of the 3 seasons of that expansion's year. You also can purchase numerous expansions from the previous years. You can also purchase the DLC packs, such as the 30th anniversary. There are also weapon packs from the Forsaken expansion. There are also other various DLC packs and packages for, you know, different kinds of collaborations they've had with different studios that are sold as DLC. If you would like to purchase everything in Destiny before the current expansion or season that's available, you have to purchase them one at a time. There is not a single option or a single sub or any option for you as the player to buy everything before what's current and catch up. If you would like to do so, you're going to be purchasing them every single one, every expansion. If there's any DLC that's relevant that offers special weapons such as Gallarhorn, the 30th anniversary, that's another 20-30 bucks you're going to have to drop as well. And if you'd like to get fully caught up with the current year, you're going to also have to buy the current expansion and the 4 seasons that are being sold in the current year as well. Why? Why is it like this? And the obvious answer that comes to my mind is confusing the player. Just buy everything, just buy what's current. And even then, I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense either. So, whatever. To keep it simple, the current expansion and the current season should be kind of the upfront in your face when you look at the DLC page for Destiny. Here's the current year that we're in with the current expansion, the current content, and here's also the current season that we are in of this expansion year. You could choose to purchase just the expansion. You could choose to purchase this season, or you could purchase both of them, or the seasons, you know, before and after this as well. So you need to have a section for what's current content in the game that you can purchase from. Everything before then needs to have a single purchase option, whether that is a subscription or whether that is a single catch-up package that's sold for, you know, 30-40 bucks that includes everything out before what is the current year. That also needs to be an option as well. It needs to be simplified in a way that if a player loves the game and wants to invest and go back and experience some of these activities and campaigns, there is an easy pathway to do that. Now, don't get me wrong, if you want to play the Shadowkeep campaign, it's easy to do. You got to pay the 30 bucks for Shadowkeep, and you can go back and play it. But then if you want to play the Forsaken expansion, or if you want to play the, you know, Be Online expansion, or you want to play the Witch Queen expansion, you got to purchase all them separate too. It should just be a single one-time purchase. It should make it very easy to go back and play that older content. And it should also be simplified for the current year, current players. Here's what we got on the store today for you this year. If you like this, purchase this. If you don't want to play what's current, you want to play what's in the past, buy this one-time purchase, everything before it's available to you. That just makes sense to me. That is a simplified way to onboard players, needs to be offered at a discount, and I would say that one of the major gripes with new players in this game has always been it's expensive to get into it, and it shouldn't be expensive. It should not be expensive to get into a game that is advertised as free to play. I'm going to have a free to play versus free to try video for Destiny sometime soon to go a little bit more in depth on this, but keeping it simple here, the investment into Destiny is very convoluted. It's confusing. You want to play what's current, you should have a single option for the expansion and the seasons that go with that for each one of those, and then you should have an option for everything before. That seems simple to me. Also, any kind of expansion or season that is about to have the content removed or sunset. Expansions, we've got confirmation from Bungie that there's not going to be any expansions that are removed anytime in the future, which is awesome. But the seasons do still go away. So I have a suggestion for Bungie that if a season is going to go away, that content should be made free for the player, you know, within 1 to 2 months of it going away. Another suggestion that I have is changing the season pass for a la carte purchase to a retroactive purchase. What I mean by this, let's say for instance that we are in the year of Lightfall, which we are. Now, there's a new season coming out in a few days, which is called Season of the Wish. If a player purchases Season of the Wish, they immediately have access to all of the previous 3 seasons that we have got for the year of Lightfall. Now, that doesn't mean they have access to the future seasons and future content, but as a player, it is very efficient, it is very affordable to purchase a $15 season pass or season ticket. You can brand it differently if you need to. That gives them access to everything that year at a discounted price, and it's there as a catch-up. It's there as, you know, a quality of life thing for the player. If the player did not play in the beginning of the expansion year because of some money problems, you know, they may want to play the new season, they may want to play the old season. If they have to pay for both of them separately, you know, money adds up. I think that towards the ending of a season, or towards the ending of an expansion, of the expansion's life cycle, if a player is willing to invest in the 3rd or 4th season of that year, give them the 1st and 2nd one for free, or give them, you know, some catch-up mechanics to get those weapons and armor from those first few seasons. That is just a quality of life thing that players will love, and it will continue to have them come back and play and get things, you know. And it's, I guess somebody could probably play devil's advocate and say, well, never buy the first few, just buy the 4th one. Sure, if you want to be devil's advocate and argue that point that you could save money by just waiting until December and buying the fourth season and everything before that comes for that, you know what? If you want to be the devil's advocate, sure. If you wanna wait 8 months and not play that content just to buy it all for a cheaper price, in the 10th, the 11th month, to spite Bungie, go for it. You're only going to have a few months to play that content anyway. And like I said, it's there as a catch-up mechanic. It's there for the players who do want to invest in the game and, show some appreciation for it. They don't have to buy anything. But I think if they're going to buy something, it's the responsibility of Bungie to make it efficient, to make it, worth the value, and to make it, very quality of life-esque for the player if they are willing to give you money. All right. So those are the problems, as well as some of the suggestions and dialogue that I have over the new player onboarding experience for Destiny. I think really a simplification of the menus, the user interface. I think extending that core questing experience that, will further introduce new mechanics, giving it some difficulty range so players who do want to go hard in the game get introduced some of those hard combat engagements in the beginning. I think a leveling, a progression, simplification, squeeze the levels down to 0 again, start from 0. I think that simplifying the way we access activities, slowly rolling it out over time makes more sense. And Bungie, please work with us as the players who have paid hundreds of dollars, if not thousands of dollars, over the years for these games and DLCs. Simplify the way to play the game and get in with the content that you want to love. If I am wanting to do a dungeon that is Grasp of Avarice and a player did not buy your $30 DLC 4 years ago, give him a discount. Give him a single purchase that gives everything, including that DLC. Help somebody out so that we can get people we want to play this game with into the game in, a valuable way that gets more people in. It's easier to get in. And at the end of the day, it's more money for you if it's a simple version to get in versus not wanting to get in at all because it's too confusing, it's too expensive. Those are my thoughts. Let me know if you're a new player, if you've had challenges, if anything here was missed, if anything was undervalued, or if you think my suggestions suck. Love to hear them. Love to hear what you got to say for the game and the new player experience. Talk to you all again soon.